Sure. Yeah, my position is Brewery Operations Technology Manager, which basically means I am in charge of kind of automation and process control for the operations side of the brewery in terms of making beer and putting it in the package. So yeah, really the simplest way of explaining it, I would say, is just using the past fermentations of a brand to predict what the current active brand fermentation is going to do. And so really we take a lot of manual measurements in fermentation, and the purpose is to reduce those manual measurements and also to take them at exactly the right time so that we get the best fermentation possible. It benefits the brewing process because if we hit the right spots in fermentation and move on to the next stage at the right time, then the whole fermentation goes very smoothly. The yeast is very happy. It makes the beer more consistent and often actually cuts time out of fermentation. In fact, we found these predictions can save up to 72 hours and on average have saved about 4% of our fermentation time. 4% doesn't sound like a big number, but that enables us to produce about 100,000 more barrels of beer in a year. So it does, it does add up. Basically what it does is give us more capacity from our same fermenters. And then, is it 100% accurate? No, it is not. It's definitely predictive. It's based on statistics. And sometimes, actually one of the other useful things we found with the predictions is they can tell you when a fermentation is not normal, when something's wrong with it, because all of a sudden it's way different from the predicted curve. And so basically the predicted curve is just saying, hey, your average fermentation for this brand does this, so this is what this fermentation is likely to do. And if you're way off of that curve, something went wrong. The most basic one is SCADA software, which is, I can't think of what SCADA stands for. I'm an operations technology guy, I can't tell you what SCADA is. That's taking data from the actual process and putting it into a computer that you can then use to control that process. Then we're taking that data out of the direct process control and putting it in our data historian. And from our data historian, we're sending it to Azure, which is basically in the cloud, Microsoft Azure, and it's got a machine learning module up in Azure that's looking at that data and saying, okay, and we tell it, here's the past data, here's the present data, saying, okay, this is the curve from the past data, here's where the present data is, adjust that curve to fit the present data, here's where we think we're going to end up.
Very cool.
Then it sends that curve back to us, we put it in our historian, and then we can look at it. The process that existed before was to check this value that we're trying to predict every 8 hours or so. Now with predictive analysis, we still have to check it, but maybe at the beginning of fermentation just to see where we stand, and then maybe we check it kind of once a day or much less. Maybe we even say, okay, we've got 40 hours until the next step that we care about, the value that we're checking this for. So we'll check it once, get that curve, and then say, okay, let's wait, 30 hours or something and check it again, just to make sure we're still on the curve. And then we'll check it at the right time instead of checking it often and then sometimes still missing the right time. In terms of staffing, it frees up our brewers to do more useful stuff, right? I mean, and our lab personnel, because we're also predicting a measurement that brewers take, and we're predicting a measurement that our lab personnel takes, and it's helping in both cases. Free them up to do other stuff. They spend less of their time doing what, kind of grunt work, manual labor, grabbing samples, taking a reading on it, recording the sample in the system, and more time actually going out and making decisions about the beer, doing other tests that we don't normally do, but we enable us to find out more about the beer, and yeah, generally just doing better things. It's not a direct, easy measurement, because we kind of have an overhead number that we attribute based on, that's the way we track our financials here, based on where it's brewed. So there's not an exact hey, we saved this much, but we do know that 4% fermentation allows us to produce more beer out of the same tanks. We know that beer I think the internal number we use is like $100 for a barrel of beer.
Okay.
You know, is what we can kind of say, yeah, that's what that barrel of beer is worth. If we can get another barrel, we get $100 more, right?
Okay.
And so this is obviously impacts that 4% of our entire fermentation capacity, allows us to get a lot more beer out of the same tanks. By this point, we are, I would say, more automated than human labor. We still have a similar number of brewers on staff as we did when we had very little automation, though. So human labor is an interesting term. We're using human labor still in the process in terms of we're employing humans to be here, but in terms of them doing physical labor, the amount they're doing is less now. And instead of going out, walking around, turning valves, doing things like that, they're starting batches, watching screens, making decisions about the process. So now basically we've raised the level of interaction with the process for the people that we have on staff. I don't think you could ever completely replace human labor in the brewing process, just because brewing is not a super high margin industry, and so I guess maybe near future.
Yeah.
That's, you're never going to be able to have robots walking around doing all of that, just because you can't invest in that as a brewery and end up paying it off. That human element is such a big thing. Brewing's a slow industry to change, and it's a craft. I think some people are starting to use it, but we're definitely one of the first to do it. We presented at a few different places now, and we're actually trying to help brewers get more into at least data tracking, even if you're not using it to predict your next fermentations, at least being able to look at those past fermentations, see how did they go, and maybe compare your current fermentation to it. And it's basically just a manual data tracking tool, but it's there. You can track data in it, you can add tags. You don't have to develop a whole database and a whole bunch of forms and stuff to track your data. And so we're trying to make it open source, and the idea is that it's only $50 to get a Raspberry Pi, and you can have a data collection system at your brewery.
Wow.
Which is, and the software's free, it's open source. So yeah, that's at brewerypi.com, and really it's just an effort to give back. It's something that we've been working on as a technology group in Deschutes, or as brewers interested in technology at Deschutes. Recording data and using that data has always been something we've had to work on, and it's been a hurdle, and it's been something we put a lot of effort into, and we've done it wrong many different times, and we've learned a lot over the years. And so this is an attempt to help other breweries do it more smoothly. We're already looking at other predictions that we can do with fermentation, but there's also predictions that you can do with maintenance of pumps and valves. You can look at how they're operating and say, oh, that needs to be replaced. We actually put some vibration monitors on the main chiller for our plant, so that's a critical piece of equipment for us, because it regulates the temperature on all the glycol in the plant, which in turn regulates the temperature on all the fermentations. So there's tons more. I could talk about it for 3 hours.
Yeah, I think even like looking into the future, doing the Brewery Pi thing, I think that's just, inventive in itself, trying to help other breweries, and that's kind of how you'll grow your legacy in the future too.
And that's something that we love about the brewing industry, is that it's always been a pretty open industry. It's not about having some advantage that other people don't have. It's more about sharing what you know and creating better beer, and have everybody create better beer.